Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Amanda and I like to share videos documenting the homestead that we're building from scratch. And today, one thing I want to share with you is some homemade sourdough focaccia bread. Now, I've made this a few times and this recipe is almost completely foolproof. I've done it and it's come out perfect every single time. I mean, it's a killer recipe. So this recipe is from Homestead and Chill. She's on Instagram. I don't think she has a YouTube, but I highly recommend checking out her blog. She has tons of amazing recipes, a lot about gardening. I love her basil pesto recipe that she shared. She has a ton of stuff over there. So this recipe is hers, not mine, but I make it and I love it. Some of the things that she lists that you will need are a large mixing bowl, a kitchen scale. I might try and put some of that over here, just make a list for you, a visual. Large mixing bowl, kitchen scale, a baking pan, either a deep-sided one, 9x13, or a shallow standard cookie pan. I'll show you the one that I use. It's really, really nice. A dough scraper, that's optional. That just kind of helps you work your dough around if you need to. I've never needed it for this recipe. A tea towel or other lint-free towel to cover your dough. I have a ton of tea towels. You can get a big bulk package of them on Amazon for fairly cheap, and I use them for everything. They're super handy. And then the ingredients, I'll put a list over here of the ingredients too. 160 grams of active sourdough starter. Now, I just fed my girl last night, and she is doing good. This is Dora, D-O-U-G-H, Ra. She is active, and she's not bubbly on the top, like a big cave, a big cone on the top. It's nice and even, but she's not falling all the way back down yet. It kind of looks like she's falling down because I just moved it, but it's not. It was perfect. So she's ready to go. And then we also need 450 grams of flour. She, in this recipe, uses 400 grams of white all-purpose flour and then 50 grams of whole wheat. Now, I don't have whole wheat in a package, but I'm going to grind my own. You can just go to the store and buy whole wheat. I'm just going to grind enough for what I need because I have wheat berries that I need to use up. I've had them for a while, and I don't want them to go bad. 350 to 400 grams of filtered water. I usually go on the lower end, depending on my humidity. It's kind of, I'd say it's humid in here today, but we're going to wing it. So you always want to stick with the lower end of water, and you can always add more later. You don't want to put too much in. So just have 400 ready, but use 350 right away in your recipe. 9 grams of salt, sea salt, kosher salt, or Himalayan salt. I use Redmond real salt. That stuff's awesome. I use it in everything, and I just got the big bulk order of it, and I keep it in my pantry, and I ordered that I think in the spring. So it's been almost a year that this has lasted me, and I still have some left, but I do need to order more. So little plug for Redmond real salt. 1 tablespoon of olive oil in the dough mixture, but then also you need a little extra for drizzling on top once it gets time to ready to bake. And then toppings of your choice. Some things that she listed are olives, chopped fresh herbs, tomatoes, artichoke hearts, garlic, and grated cheese, etc. The two that I've done, the first one I did, I got sun-dried tomatoes and poked them into my focaccia bread, and then I also put some fresh rosemary on top, and I did feta cheese with that tomato. So feta tomato focaccia was amazing. I loved it. And then the second one that I did was jalapeno cheddar. So I just got cheddar cheese blocks from the store, and I chopped up small little chunks, and then I put I had some leftover jalapenos from my garden that I needed to use up, and I ended up slicing those in like quarters. I did rings, and then I did them in quarters so they were smaller, and I put those all over there, and then I sprinkled it with a little fresh parsley just for color, and I baked it, and that was gone within like 20 minutes. It was eaten up by my family. Some other things, one thing I thought was interesting that people have done with this bread is they've actually put cinnamon sugar on top of it, and then they made a glaze out of powdered sugar, and they made like a cinnamon roll, so like a sweet version of the focaccia bread. I didn't know you could do that. I'm going to probably try that pretty soon. I still haven't decided what I want to do with this one. Maybe I'll make this a sweet one. Maybe I'll make it a savory one. Another thing that we had considered, which I might do this time just to try as a family, we were going to make it as a pizza dough. So the base of the focaccia, the bread itself, is the dough for your pizza. And then you put the toppings on, the pizza sauce, the cheese, the pepperonis, and whatever else you want. So I might make this a little pizza for my kids tomorrow because this is going to be an overnight thing. You could bake it all in one day, but considering it is 4/21 right now, and this recipe takes a while for the sourdough to ferment, it's not going to be baked today. If I had started this maybe at like 8 in the morning, I would have had the time to bake it today, but I'm going to let it proof in the fridge overnight, and I'll bring you along with all of that. So right now, we're going to swap over here and get started, and I will show you how we put this dough together.
Okay, so I'm just going to set my bowl on my kitchen scale and zero it out. And then once that's all zeroed out, I'm going to go ahead and measure out the starter amount that I'm going to use for this recipe. Once all my starter is in there, I'm going to go ahead and zero out my scale again and then add the called for amount of water to my bowl. And now I'm going to go ahead and add 1 tablespoon of olive oil to the bowl of sourdough and water. Now I'm just going to zero out my scale and go ahead and add the salt that's required for this recipe. Now I just want to give a quick mix to this to get it nice and combined. You don't want to mix it too much, just enough so that it's all combined nicely. Now I'm just going to zero out my scale again and go ahead and start adding in the flour. It's really handy to just be able to use the scale over and over again to measure into the bowl. It's just a lot easier than trying to dirty up a bunch of different bowls with different measurements. I just use the one bowl and just zero out the scale, and that helps me be able to measure multiple ingredients. So I decided to throw in some of my own flour to this recipe. When you grind your own wheat berries, it still has all of the good nutrients in it. It doesn't have anything stripped from it like what can happen in commercial production of flour with the bleaching and stripping of the grains. This way you get a nice pure grain that you ground, and it's super fresh, and this really helps your sourdough. Your sourdough really thrives off of this stuff. And oftentimes I'll make sure I grind enough so that I'm able to feed my sourdough starter with the ground flour, because I've done experiments with regular all-purpose flour, even unbleached all-purpose flour, and ground flour at home, and it ends up making my sourdough starter that just much more active. And there I just showed you I had some left over to feed my sourdough starter, and then I went ahead and added it in with my flour, and I got the maximum amount of grams that I needed by using a little portion of my flour plus all-purpose flour. And then I just gave it a good stir just to get it all combined, and now it's ready to rest. So after letting this sit and rest for about 30 minutes, I went in and I got some wet hands, and I kind of show you that in the video because that helps the sourdough not stick to your hands. And I'm just doing what's called stretch and folds. You're just grabbing the corners or the outer side of your dough and just lifting it up to create those gluten strands and to get nice air pockets in your dough. And we're just stretching it out and putting it right back in the middle on itself. This is kind of helping us create that dough ball also. It really makes your dough nice and smooth, and it replaces kneading. So I just keep covering it up with a damp tea towel, and we're going to want to do this at least 3 or 4 times. So I spread these stretch and folds out every 30 minutes. So I do about 4 sets. So it takes 2 hours total, but it doesn't seem that bad. We just set a timer, and every time the timer goes off, I go ahead and stretch it and fold it. The goal of this dough is to sit and ferment at about 75 degrees temperature is what you want in order for it to double in size. So about 4 hours, and this should double in size. And I don't have my house at 75 degrees inside. It would be much too warm. So what I end up doing is just turning on my microwave light. My microwave light is also over my stove, and that ends up warming up my microwave to the about 75 degree mark. And so it really helps for me to proof my dough in my microwave. I don't turn it on or anything like that. I just let it sit in there and kind of use it as a proofing oven. And that works for me. But you can get creative. You can set it on top of your fridge because the heat from your fridge running will rise and give a little bit warmer temperature up there. So we're just continuing to do this for the next about 2 hours. And then once I'm done with that, I will let it sit at room temperature for 2 hours, not touching it, and just let it continue to rise. So now after letting it rise for 2 hours, it's nice and doubled and really bubbly. I was so happy with all those little air bubbles. That's how you know that it's fermenting and doing its job. So now I'm just going ahead and oiling my pan. I want to get it nice and smooth so that it does not stick when I bake it. I just poured it in there, and then I'm using a paper towel to get all the edges and corners just to make it a really nice surface for baking. Now with wet hands, I'm going to go ahead and go into that dough and try and separate it from the sides of the bowl. I did end up needing to scrape out some chunks. You'll see here in the video. It stuck to the bowl. I maybe, during my last set of stretch and folds, probably next time we'll pull all of the dough out of the bowl and just oil the bowl a little bit. That'll kind of help me get it out when it's this step next time. Just a little tip just to help. You could use a scraper if you have a nice flexible plastic bench scraper. You could scrape all those out and you wouldn't have to worry about oiling the bowl. But next time I'll just oil the bowl. Not a big deal. So I'm getting it all the dough out of the bowl. I want to make sure I get every bit of it. And now I'm just going to press it as best I can into the corners and try and somewhat get it to form into the pan. You don't want to force it too much and like rip the dough, because that's just kind of counterproductive, but just do your best to spread it out, because now we're going to cover it with a wet towel again, and we're going to stick it in the fridge overnight. You can proof this for, I suppose, up to 24 hours if you want in the fridge. I just did it overnight and, just gave it some time to settle in the pan, and then I was going to bake it in the morning for my family to enjoy the next day. So now the next morning, you can see it's kind of settled on its own into the pan, into the corners. It's got some really nice air bubbles in it. And I just went ahead and threw oil on top of the dough. And now I'm just poking it with my fingers almost all the way down to the bottom of the pan. I almost threw the dough. But I just want to make those divots in the dough because that's kind of what gives it its texture and really sets it apart and makes it look like focaccia bread. And so I decided to just go with the old classic jalapeno cheddar. I was going to try and do maybe a pizza or something fancy, but I just went and chopped my cheddar cheese up into blocks and then popped it in those little holes that I made. There's my air bubble. I was so excited about that. It's the little things with sourdough. You just know that you're doing it right when you get those bubbles. And then I had some jalapenos that I chopped from my garden and froze, and I just thawed them and went ahead and threw some diced jalapenos on top and sprinkled it with a little bit of salt, and then in the oven it went. Now we're baking this at 450 degrees for about 25 minutes, and you want to check it halfway through just to make sure it's coming along well. And then once you get the little brown spots on top and the dough is done all the way through, you're done. This is your focaccia bread. So now I just let it cool, and once it was cool to room temperature, that's when you want to go ahead and slice it. You don't want to slice it when it's hot. Just give it a little bit to rest, and then you can give it a slice. And here we go. I could have probably had a better raise out of this if it was a little bit warmer in my house, but I think overall it looks pretty good. There's some nice air bubbles, and it just had a really nice texture. It was perfect. My family ate it up within the day. So if you guys give this recipe a try, go ahead and let me know in the comments what you think, and thank you for watching. Bye guys.